Hello and welcome to State of Play on Mint Press News for your weekly Monday episode where we look at all the terrible things that happened over the weekend. There's an interesting MAGA versus Trumpian Zionist realignment going on, which I'm bringing popcorn to the watch party for as that story develops. Israel has launched another offensive into Gaza, which we'll be addressing later this week. Netanyahu has delayed his corruption trial again. And a Jubilee debate with Mehdi Hasan versus 20 far-right conservatives dropped and is sparking a ton of debates. Guys, strap in. This is going to be a rant-based episode. Not where I'll answer your questions to the best of my abilities here at the end. Why the world sucks so bad right now, and also why you shouldn't despair and maybe what you can do about it. I'm your host, Greg Stoker, and since the world, again, sucks right now, and we exist in a collapsing late stage of capitalism, it's time to get my editor-mandated plug out of the way. If you're new here on Mint Press News, we are a small, independent newsroom with no corporate sponsors. I do the live shows twice a week. There's other journalists that do other stuff. I'm the live show guy for now. Also, Loki has his own Watchdog podcast as well. But if you're picking up what we're putting down, you can go to Mint Press News on Patreon, seeing that we're demonetized on everything since I think it was the early 2000s when they were first targeted. While I was still in the military, while they were still first targeted by Google Owl, which was this weird surveillance program. Anyways, Mint Press is demonetized. If you want to help us out, check out the Patreon. If not, because you're being nickeled and dimed by the degrading material circumstances of your life, material conditions of your life, you can just share, and subscribe and spread the good word. We're just glad you're here. Mandated Patreon plug out of the way. All right. So today we are going to be addressing something the broader, why everything's kind of weird and collapsing. We're going to bring in hypernormalization stuff. We're also going to talk about platforming fascists and liberal resistance politics. And, there's a lot of stuff that we can bring into. AOC had a controversial vote in her office in the Bronx, was vandalized because, she has a problematic history of playing political sheepdog cover for the ongoing genocide in Gaza. We're going to get to all of that. So to begin, we're going to start with this Jubilee debate, which has actually sparked a lot of controversy. Should we be platforming this? How should we approach, self-avowed fascists? And I will just say that humans have this perennial habit of always believing they occupy the most consequential political and cultural moment of human history. And of course, that might be true because it's the only one currently happening. So we're not going to get into temporality and philosophy on this one. It's beyond the scope of the show. I'll just say this. It's not looking great right now. And can we please stop platforming? This is my personal opinion in engaging with Jubilee on their quote, one progressive versus 20 far-right conservatives. Clickbait BS. There have been a lot of good takes on this, but here's mine first. And this is the last time I'll ever play one of these videos on here again, just for context, in case you guys weren't tracking.
Friend democracy? No, I don't. Absolutely not.
What do you believe in?
Autocracy.
How do we get to an autocracy?
I think, quite frankly, that if we are able to enact local leaders...
Who is the we, by the way?
I think, quite frankly, these far-right conservatives sitting right around
White
me.
people?
Yeah. Okay. I'm for defending the traditional demographics of this country, which is majority white, so and should stay.
I mean, look, there's huge revisionist history in white supremacist culture. It's actually kind of crazy. I might be able to go into it more and talk about it, but I don't know. I grew up all around it in Texas, which, we stole from Mexico, anyways, who were also colonizers as well. So anyways, continuing.
How does the United States, how would Connor's America look? What would it look like?
Well, quite frankly, I think we would deport people who shouldn't be here.
I didn't ask about deporting. What does the government look like?
It's the friend-enemy distinction, right? You
Carl
liberals,
Schmitt, the Nazi theoretician.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't care.
Are you a fan of the Nazis?
Well, they persecuted the church a little bit. I'm not a fan of that. But
what about the persecution of the...
I want to bring this up. So he brings up the persecution of the church under the Nazis. And as people are still filtering into the live, I'm going to regurgitate the, I think Pastor Frank or Francis Niemöller. Okay, someone has to fact check me in the comments, but it's Niemöller. He was a Lutheran pastor, I believe. He was a Lutheran or Presbyterian, I think Lutheran. And he was a Nazi. He was a member of the Nazi Party. As I recall, he supported the Nazi Party and a lot of their deportation, blood and soil rhetoric. And he wrote the spoken word poem. At first, they came for the communists, but I said nothing because I wasn't a communist. Then it came for the socialists, but I said nothing because I wasn't a socialist. Then it was the the unionists, the trade unionists. Then they came for the Jews, and then they came for me. And there was no one left to speak for me. So yes, the Nazis did persecute the church, and the reason this fascist pastor, who eventually kind of flipped his political position, he was still completely problematic, was because he objected to the fascist control of the state control of churches. But obviously, under this kind of stuff, churches will always be wrapped into the state. It's baked into their entire political philosophy. So that was stupid. Anyways, I just wanted to point that out as a historical artifact before we continue this.
Jews.
Well, I mean, I certainly don't support anyone's human dignity being assaulted. I'm a Catholic.
But you don't condemn Nazi persecution of the Jews?
I think that there was a little bit of persecution and stuff like that, which is bad. We may have to rename this show
because you're a little bit more than a far-right Republican.
Hey, what can I say?
I think you can say, I'm a fascist.
Yeah, I am.
Because you know that...
Ooh, okay. Yeah, there was just a Fox News host speaking a couple days ago, and he said, we need to, like the black, he said, quote, the blacks, Jesus Christ, reclaim the N-word. Well, we need to reclaim the Nazi word. What's up, Nazi? He said this on primetime Fox. So now they're just really out in the open about it. And first of all, just wanted to point out real solid master race vibes coming off that Ubermensch who was just talking. Just kidding. That's sarcasm, by the way. Second, of course, a lifelong debater like Mehdi Hasan annihilated a bunch of Gen Z fascists since their ideology is so inherently rife with contradictions. But this just goes to show you that if you make white supremacists fear that they'll become a minority, like white replacement theory, they assume, at the very least non-consciously, but they assume that they will be treated as they treat minorities or see minorities treated under their policies, and they'll see their entire political position as an existential battle for their self-determination, freedom, and physical survival. So, yeah, because they treat minorities like that. They don't want to become a minority. It's one of their greatest existential fears. And they will vote while they still can vote, even though that guy was just championing for one more time to vote in an autocrat and then no more voting, to impoverish themselves. They'll vote to impoverish themselves, to evict themselves, to imprison themselves, and ultimately, in this age, to enslave themselves to what you could call capitalists or their techno-feudal oligarchic masters in order to maintain their own supremacy and therefore their own safety. So they're fascists. They control and are inextricably embedded in the apparatus of state violence. They are still testing the waters, not to see what they can get away with, but how fast they can get away with it without being actually challenged. And that challenge really has to come from us, right? And we'll talk about what that can look like, but it's not going to come from controlled opposition democratic socialists like AOC, Bernie Sanders, soon to be Mamdani. It's already happening. It seems like he's probably going to end up kissing the ring. He's changed a lot of his speeches on Israel, and that's how they get you. And it came after his meeting with the billionaires last week in New York City. These guys who wish to incrementally reform the system under terms and authority of the bourgeoisie. And that's why they're always co-opted, because they sacrifice the ideals and promises they made to get elected in order to maintain their newfound privilege and access to political power. This is why under our political system, politicians say whatever they want to say to get arrested. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. You never do what you say you're going to do. And it's time to get real about this before it's too late, right, y'all? Because look, we can see from the interview, and I think Mehdi Hasan, and I have a lot of problems with him, did it to expose them and to generate clickbait, because he's all about clickbait too at his Zateo News. That's why he gets onto Piers Morgan, which we'll talk about as well. But like his ostensible thing was to expose them. And beyond all their rhetoric, they want you dead. They may go into clickbait YouTube channels like Jubilee and engage in a rules-based debate, but they want you dead. And that's why platforming them in a cordial environment muddies the waters and is truly irresponsible, because it spreads their vile message and makes them seem somewhat innocuous in their pastel polos and stupid hats, following the rules of debate, shaking hands after that. But they want you in a cage, right? Whether that's physical in terms of the ICE detention center in Miami, which, you know, the Human Rights Watch just reported on, and the Guardian just published an article that detainees were shackled with their hands behind their backs and forced to kneel and eat food from styrofoam plates like dogs, real Abu Ghraib stuff. Or a cage that's like basically an oppressive legal cage, typified by their perverse crusade to control women's bodies through legislation. And it begins, as it always does, with the most marginalized groups first, and works its way up the privilege ladder until they have to finally deal with the race traders. Unless you're a socialist. Then you'll get the hammer early on, even if you're white. Again, they want us dead. Until you actually internalize that reality, you're going to be absolutely useless to the rest of us. And while it was gratifying, and I'll admit it, I watched a lot of the clips and I enjoyed them. He's a master debater. While it was gratifying to see Mehdi wipe the floor with these mouth-breathing idiots so that people can finally see what they really think. I mean, if somehow you missed what they really think and how they really feel and what they really want to do, somehow you missed it. Ultimately, I'm reminded by something like, honestly, my grandfather once said. He fought the fascists up through Italy and across Europe in Patton's Third Army. And then he had a cattle ranch after he retired from the military out in Mena, Arkansas. And there was Klan in those woods growing up there. So he basically always said that you don't mud wrestle with a pig because you'll get covered in shit and the pig probably likes it. And also he said that the only debate worth having against fascists is with a gun. And that's just what he said as an anecdote. And I'm just reporting that. And I'm not endorsing anything for legal reasons. But those words were said by a person I once knew. And, you know, as a 4-time combat veteran, the social contract was, now that I was thinking about this earlier today, was that I wage unjust imperial wars. And if I don't, you know, get killed or kill myself, I get to chill for the rest of my life and collect benefits. But if you think that's still going to happen or be a reality going forward in the country that we're now a part of, I don't think you've really been paying attention. You know, the life that we were promised by our boomer parents or Gen X parents, it was really not going to come to fruition, right? In summary, I don't know why we're engaging in debate and platforming people who effectually want us dead, displaced, or in cages. You know, there's a reason why the Palestinians don't argue with Zionists. Why can't we learn from them? You know, this is an existential conflict, and we need to start treating it like one. And guys, there's always going to be fascists and people who yearn for autocracy and propaganda to stoke a culture war so we don't have a class war. And that last piece is the real problem, right? There is the same propaganda coming from conservative and liberal spaces. So let's talk about liberal spaces. Have you heard of dark woke? No? It's pretty much as dumb as it sounds. And it's like this social movement within the Democratic Party, dark woke. All right. And let me pull up the New York Times article that came out earlier this year about it. So guys, dark woke. What is dark woke? Democrats are trying out a new attitude. It's provocative, edgy, and perilously towing the line of not being too offensive. As liberals try to get their groove back, some party insiders say Democratic politicians have been encouraged to embrace a new form of combative rhetoric aimed at winning back voters who have responded to President Trump's no-hold-barred version of politics. It's an attempt to step outside the bounds of the political correctness that Republicans have accused Democrats of establishing, and it requires being crass but discerning, rude, but only to a point. It's definitely going to work, guys. All right. So dark work, woke is actually a term that some Democratic strategists are using to describe a more aggressive, combative rhetorical style aimed at winning back voters who have been drawn to Donald Trump's style of politics, as the article just said. It involves stepping outside traditional PC political correctness, right? Being willing to use blunt language and attack opponents, even if it means being perceived as rude or crass, but with a degree of discernment. The term is meant to be a counterpoint to what some see as an overly cautious rhetoric on the quote unquote left. But of course, they're not the left. And honestly, though, from a sociological perspective, this dark woke term is related to the broader concept of woke, which originated in Black or African-American vernacular English to describe awareness of racial prejudice and discrimination. And in recent years, woke has become a widely used term, often with political connotations, and has been both embraced and criticized by different groups. Obviously, the dark woke approach is a more assertive and confrontational interpretation of the woke concept, particularly within the context of political discourse. So essentially, though, if you're really looking at it, dark woke is a strategic attempt by some Democrats to adopt a more aggressive and less restrained communication style, drawing inspiration from the tactics of Trump, but with the goal of winning back voters again. And it's not going to work. It's really not going to work. This is just another marketing strategy that they're still trying to string out instead of actually fighting. And I wanted to talk about this because it ties into the whole problem with our media landscape. Here's Matt Walsh, avowed Christian fascist and MAGA influencer, talking about it. And honestly, it's not the worst take.
Last few months, there's a phrase, a term that started popping up in headlines, and the term is dark woke. And this is a new form of wokeness that has emerged. This is perhaps the answer to countering Donald Trump and MAGA. They've not been able to come up with an answer over 10 years. And now the New York Times has a long think piece on the topic. Headline, "What is dark woke? Democrats are trying out a new attitude. It's provocative, edgy, and perilously towing the line of not being too offensive." There was a time last summer when the Democratic Party was cool. Kamala Harris had just stepped in.
Okay, the Democratic Party was never cool, even when it was supposed to be Brat Summer.
As Democrat Party nominee for president in the waning days of Brat Summer. She went on the popular podcast Call Her Daddy. Tim Walz's outdoorsy drip led to a Chapel Roan-inspired camo trucker hat. The memes were flowing, and the party's mood was high. The Democratic Party was not cool during that time. Some party insiders say Democratic
I hate how he's right.
politicians have been encouraged to embrace a new form of combative rhetoric. It's an attempt to step outside the bounds of political correctness that Republicans have accused Democrats of establishing, and requires being crass but discerning, rude but only to a point. This is what they're claiming, that Democrats have this problem, and they've started to get more aggressive and more confrontational because they weren't already, right, with the rioting and destroying vehicles and all that. Like they weren't already aggressive and confrontational enough. And
this is one narrative of the far right I can't understand. Like, hey, go to an actual protest, get pepper sprayed a bunch of times, okay? And that was when a Democrat was in office. I'm referring to the Biden-Palestine protests.
this is dark woke, and the New York Times says that it may just save the party. This is the party's redemption, is dark woke.
Okay, yeah, obviously it didn't work, and I don't think you guys remember when Representative Jasmine Crockett, who obviously is a supporter of Israel's combat operation in Palestine, called Governor Greg Abbott of Texas, who I hate too. I hate him, who was paralyzed and in a wheelchair, Hot Wheels. Well, this is an encapsulation of dark woke, and it's the entire problem with everything that they're doing. Wait, where is she? Is she here?
Hot Texas streets, honey. Y'all know we got Governor Hot Wheels down there. Come on now. And the only thing hot about him is that he is a hot mess, honey. So yes.
All right. Look, y'all. Yeah, so that's really going to do the trick, right? It's worse and less effective rage bait, obviously, than what MAGA comes up with. But hey, anything not to talk about class or workers or taxation of the rich or imperialism or capitalism or genocide. Am I right? Whoa, sorry, I had a Had a long weekend. Yeah. Anyways, while it was cathartic to watch Mehdi Hasan wipe the floor with people, his entire stance, though, and this is really what I wanted to get into, is problematic and endemic of the crisis of neoliberalism. I saw one person comment under my video, quote, I watched the entire debate earlier. It's a pretty gross clickbait factory, and Mehdi's liberalism was pretty galling. Police good, Constitution sacrosanct. Couldn't explain why Trump would ethnically cleanse Gaza, U.S. imperialism, capitalism, etc. Yep, and that's it right there, honestly. Why Mehdi is routinely on Piers Morgan as Piers tries to rehabilitate his image. Let's take a look at what my colleague at Mint Press, Low-Key, who has debated Piers multiple times on his own show, has to say about it.
Nothing. He's changed nothing. He's trying to save his own reputation historically. And because he understood that it's irrefutable what Israel is doing. But he's been a key weapon of Israel throughout this war. Let's be clear. When he asks you if you condemn Hamas, he's trying to do one of two things. Either criminalize you or enlist you into Israeli military propaganda. Those are his two objectives. And so what he's done throughout this period of time, it can't be separated from Murdoch's history. You know, when Mordecai Vanunu was kidnapped by Mossad, it was while he was under the care of Murdoch's newspaper, The Times. Yeah? Murdoch literally had an Israeli intelligence group in this country in the 90s, which hacked his opponent's stuff. Murdoch is described by Benjamin Netanyahu in his book, Bibi, My Story, as one of his closest friends, as Israel has never had a better friend than Rupert Murdoch. So we're supposed to take this person, who is attempting to either criminalize supporters of Palestine or enlist them into Israeli military propaganda as objective and neutral just because he says he is. He wants some sort of medal or award for recognizing Palestinian humanity at this point. The propagandists who were involved in the Nazi war and propagandized for them were held responsible and hanged at Nuremberg. Yeah? He has been a propagandist for the Zionist genocide in Gaza.
Yeah. And Mehdi Hasan, you know, because he's part of the game, it's almost like rich people all know each other. The money game, the notoriety game, gets on Piers Morgan, and through Mehdi's established quote unquote progressivism, legitimizes and revises Piers's rehabilitation as being not complicit in genocide. And this is how they all work together. The conservatives, the libs, neo-libs, whatever you want to call it, all part of the same power structure and economic structure. And so take AOC, for instance. One second. Let me pull this guy up. Is this it? Yes, add to stage. Oh my God. Again, whole weekend thing. All right. So, anyways, take AOC. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, congressman, part of the squad, someone who says she's a democratic socialist. What happened? Well, vandalism of a campaign office on July 21st, 2025. Today, her Bronx campaign office was vandalized with red paint and a sign reading AOC funds genocide in. Okay, we can take this down. We don't need ads. Sorry. Yeah, AOC funds genocide. A sign was tied to the gate. The incident is currently under investigation, according to NBC New York. Criticism from Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, probably the most milquetoast center left of the left wing. I mean, I know a lot of people say that Democratic Socialists are not even part of the left. But anyways, DOC slammed Ocasio-Cortez for her recent vote against a Republican amendment aiming to cut funding for Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system. Fox News reports that the DSA commended other representatives for voting against the amendment. Ocasio-Cortez defended her vote on X, stating that the amendment would only cut defensive capabilities while allowing for offensive aid to continue. She also faced criticism from Palestinian activists like Mohammed El-Kurd for her stance on the matter. All right, so basically, you know what? Let's pull this up. She made a statement an hour ago about this, and it's actually important as a demonstration of how this works. Okay. Okay. She says that Google is free. If you're saying I voted for military funding, you are lying. Receipts attached. Drag me for my positions all you want, but lying about them doesn't make you part of the left. If you believe neo-Nazis are welcome and operating in good faith, you can have them. All right. My response was, you're literally not part of the left. You're an enemy to any progressive movement. You have kissed the ring of the bourgeoisie, and now your only purpose is to sheepdog working class people back to the Democratic Party in order to maintain your privilege and political power. But this is a response from an actual democratic socialist. You voted against an amendment that other socialist representatives voted for to strip funding from the Israeli military. You then came on this website and defended funding the Iron Dome. This is why you are being criticized. So basically, the amendment was kind of confusing. As I understand it, not having enough time to have read it today, it was Marjorie Taylor Greene did a funding amendment to send more weapons, but also less weapons or less funding allocations for the Iron Dome. And what's stupid about her position is the United States is always going to send Israel more weapons. But voting against defunding the Iron Dome is one of the things that lets Israel act with impunity. So that's why it's an absurd position. And they would actually prefer more funding for the Iron Dome than they would offensive weapons. That's just a fact. So, yeah. Oh, hey, someone just came in and said, hi, y'all. What's up, Jimmy? We're just talking about AOC. All right, so look, guys. The world seems to suck right now because it does. And it also feels differently than it has ever in our lifetime. And let me tell you why from my perspective. I'm going to get back to the Democratic Party, but fascists, autocrats, people who want to dominate you for their own personal gain will always exist. Liberals, people who espouse certain values but will fold on their lofty ideals to maintain their safety and access to privilege and political power will always exist. Also, like Bernie, AOC. Hopefully Mamdani exists the trap, but I don't think it's actually possible. Happy to be proven wrong, but I won't be. So look, we are entering an era, and this is kind of what I wanted to talk about now that we're in the second half of the episode. And sorry, I don't really have any graphics to let you guys watch. I don't know, you guys can put it on, turn the video off, or just listen to the silky tones of my voice. But we are in an era of hypernormalization, where we see that systems are crumbling, but daily life continues. The dissonance is real. Everything about our current society and condition is dissonant. This is why you're so exhausted. There is so much dissonance in the world, in our society, that people don't know how to handle it. Hypernormalization, okay, is a heady $10 word, but it captures the weird, dire atmosphere of the U.S. in 2025 and was first articulated and came up with in 2005, I believe, by scholar Alexei Yurchak to describe the civilian experience in Soviet Russia. Hypernormalization, therefore, describes life in a society where two main things are happening. First is people are seeing that governing systems and institutions are fundamentally broken. And the second thing that's happening is that for reasons including a lack of effective leadership, both on the left, the Democrats, and the right, and an inability to imagine how to disrupt the status quo, people carry on with their lives as normal despite systemic dysfunction, right? Give or take a heavy load of fear, dread, and denial and dissociation. So like kind of what you're feeling is the disconnect between seeing that systems are failing, not just domestically, globally as well. I mean, we can talk about NATO, we can talk about Germany. We could talk about the UN, ICC, ICJ. And yet the institutions and the people in power are just like ignoring it and pretending everything is going on the way it has. Now, there is a wrinkle that I would like to address with this Trumpian philosophy, that they feel like they're actually changing stuff. But no, this is how a system and an institution is degraded and collapses, because they know it's kind of ending, but they're trying to plunder as much as they can from it while it still exists. So basically, the increasing instability of the U.S. democratic norms has prompted these references from like 20 years ago to this sociological concept of hypernormalization. So Donald Trump is kind of like dismantling the government, checks and balances. And honestly, it's Stephen Miller. He's the brains behind the whole thing. He's like the CEO of destroying the American government and checks and balances and stuff. But Donald Trump's like the CEO of the board. So we'll just say Donald Trump, but it's really like Stephen Miller and the Heritage Foundation that's really the driving thrust behind this. Trump's just getting on board because they're taking care of him. So anyways, they're dismantling the government, checks and balances, and an apparent advance towards a unitary executive. This is what the Heritage Foundation talks about, a unitary executive doctrine that would grant him near unlimited authority, the autocrat that the Ubermensch freaking master race guy, Great Genes, was talking about at the beginning of the episode from the Jubilee video. And tech moguls like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Larry Ellison, those two more behind the scenes, are helping the government consolidate power, not just through Doge, which is pretty much dead and didn't work, but also through like Palantir national databases and stuff, and are aggressively to reduce the federal and working to aggressively reduce the federal workforce. So institutions like the NIH, National Institute of Health, National Weather Service, Centers for Disease Control. What's another one being heavily assaulted? The Department of Education, the Food and Drug Administration, because like RFK Jr. just wants to like reintroduce tapeworms back into the supply chain. They're being dismissed, right? And globally, once in a lifetime climate disasters, war, lingering trauma from like COVID continue to unfold, while an explosion of like generative AI threatens to destabilize and is destabilizing how people think and absorb information, make a living, relate to each other. For many in the US, Trump 2.0 is having a devastating effect on daily life. ICE raids, the increase of the surveillance state, uncertainty due to these tariff programs. And for others, routines of life continue, albeit threaded with mind-altering, stuff like scrolling past AI-generated cartoon of ICE officers arresting immigrants before dinner. So hypernormalization actually captures this juxtaposition of the dysfunctional and the mundane pretty well. Again, the system is collapsing. Everyone's pretending like it's not. At least the politicians who know that a change needs to happen. And this is why I bring up the Democrats all the time. The entire system is collapsing. They say in their political rhetoric that Trump is slashing the government. The institutions are falling apart, but they will not do anything differently. Mamdani is a great case of what hypernormalization looks like. Okay, because he invigorated the base, which the Democrats have not been able to do since Obama. And instead of, voting blue, no matter who, they want him to kiss the ring. So I think that's just hypernormalization in the nutshell. And they know it won't work. Deep down, they know it won't work, but they're going to keep benefiting off a decaying system and power structure. It's like that cartoon, like the road runner that runs off a cliff. And the second, he keeps his legs flapping and he only falls when he looks down. I think that's a pretty good allegory for what's going on. And then I see someone say Mamdani is a DNC plant. I think he will become one. Yeah, but anyways, so where was I? Yeah, it's just about, I think that's a great demonstration of what that is. So it's where the powerful are abandoning any pretense of common inclusive ideals and are instead using their position to settle scores, reward loyalty, hollow out institutions, make more concessions to their donors, squash down on public dissent. And that's happening both on the left and the right. Again, I'm sorry for calling the Democrats the left. But yeah, that's it. So Trump reminds me, Trump's U.S., and it's not Trump's U.S., it's also done in collaboration with the DNC, kind of reminds me of like when Boris Yeltsin in Russia in the 1990s, he's promising a new kind of democracy, but in reality, he allowed just the oligarchs to loot and distort the entire societies. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good comparison. I mean, of course, it's a completely different political landscape now, but it's kind of what's happening in general. So witnessing these like large scale systems slowly unravel in real time can be profoundly surreal and frightening. The hypernormalization framework, I mean, offers a way to understand what we're feeling and why. In his 1995 book, They Thought They Were Free, the Germans, 1933 to 45, a journalist named Milton Mayer described a similar state of freeze in German citizens during the rise of the Nazi Party. I think a quote from it was like, yeah, you don't want to act or even talk alone. You don't want to go out of your way to make trouble. Why not? Well, you are not in the habit of doing it. And this is not just fear of standing alone that restrains you. It's also genuine uncertainty. And I want to get back to this. Why don't you do anything or make trouble? Because you're not in the habit of doing it. And in the last 10 minutes, I'm going to be like, how do you get in the habit of doing it? Experts say action can break the spell. Yes. Being active politically in whatever way, I think helps reduce apocalyptic gloom, says Betsy Hartman, an activist, scholar, and author of The America Syndrome, which explores the importance of resisting apocalyptic thinking. And this is why liberals drive me crazy. If we understand the premise that, exercising your civil disobedience and your protest muscles, maybe it starts with just going to a, No Kings protest, which was, of course, a bit of a psyop done by a billionaire funded by corporate interests to, show up one and done. But I don't think it's completely useless because, again, disobedience, even showing up to controlled protests, basically starts you down the path. And again, not in the habit of doing it, being in the habit of like showing up to like mutual aid or like different like educational courses, like know your rights lectures, even stupid protests that won't accomplish anything. It's all part of it. So I encourage people to do it. Again, action can break the spell. And this is why liberals drive me crazy. It's all performative. They're like voting. This is why Cory Booker and now Hakeem Jeffries will grandstand in the Senate yapping for hours on end, accomplishing nothing, and be like, give me $5 so we can really fight this. I mean, that's inaction. They won't use any of their powers. They won't disrupt anything through lawfare or, Senate procedures or congressional procedures. They won't do it because they fundamentally don't inherently disagree with what's going on because they have the same donors. I mean, not completely, but some of their biggest donors are AIPAC, the real estate lobby, the military industrial complex. Like, come on. And they'll basically, I think another thing that they're doing, and this is why if you're on the left, you're like, what the hell is going on? Because they'll do stuff like a Fight the Oligarchy tour, they'll actually mention the term oligarch right after Trump got in and did his Oval Office speech, inaugural speech with like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg in the background and Miriam Adelson in the second row background. And they'll do a Fight the Oligarchy tour for a month, for a couple weeks. And then the DNC will tell them, okay, back off. Now it's time to put forward Gavin Newsom and Josh Shapiro for the new Democratic 2028 presidential ticket. And so they're the worst perpetrators of this dissonance of hypernormalization, because they're saying they're fighting. They're saying we're the only ones who can fight them. So don't vote third party because that's a wasted vote. But they're actually not doing anything to fight. Yeah. And that's it in a nutshell. I think from my perspective, I got asked by my editor came up with the idea for this episode, and I was thinking about like why does the world suck so bad right now? And it's because the dissonance that we're existing in. Like the post-World War II era is collapsing. We're in late stage capitalism. It's not working. There's a whole anti-West, anti-US dollar coalition forming. Not fast enough, really, for my liking, because BRICS is full of its own inherent contradictions, but it's definitely better than nothing. And yeah, it's hard to parse out what's going on, and the gaslighting's intense, the propaganda is intense. We're witnessing multiple genocides. The most live streamed one is in Palestine, and there's nothing you feel like you can do to stop it. Yeah, that's why it's literally the dissonance, and it's difficult cognitively. It can lead to depression, anxiety, because your levels aren't. It's hard to have an equilibrium in this insane news cycle. And if you actually give a shit about like what's happening politically and in the world, because you possess a soul, that means you have to constantly be exposed to this. And, a lot of people who are gravitated towards more like left-wing politics, not liberal politics, aren't the kind of people who say like, what, I just need to not pay attention to the news. I just need to work on myself, which doesn't work. Okay, that doesn't work. I mean, you should still go to therapy, but like focusing on yourself and not being engaged in like your community and the world in general doesn't work. This is why, a lot of people just go to the therapist and say, hey, put me on antidepressants. I'm not discounting that, but like if that's all you're doing in this insane dissonance right now, yeah, you're probably going to be pretty depressed and have a really bleak outlook on everything. So in order to like fight against hypernormalization, be like, hey, no, this is not fucked up. I mean, sorry, this is fucked up. This is not normal. And I'm not going to double down on thinking like that it's kind of like when Mehdi Hasan in the Jubilee interview kept mentioning like the Constitution, defending the Constitution. Trump's in violation of like the 1st, 3rd, 4th, 22nd, 19th Amendment. It's like, yeah, dude, the Constitution's getting slashed, bro. Like the US Constitution is not long for this world. It's not going to exist from what comes. So using it as this sacrosanct construct to like own fascists is literally not the play. This is believing in institutions that aren't going to work anymore, that aren't going to survive, but pretending like they're going to last forever and not making any plans behind it. And that was my main problem with the interview. And that's why I thought of the sociological concept of hypernormalization, because that's exactly what it is. There's nothing we can do because of our elected officials to defend the Constitution. There's not. It's going to get slashed. And the second, like, we know and start preparing for it to get slashed, because it's already effectively slashed. ICE isn't listening to the Constitution. The federal judges aren't. They're not doing anything to resist. The Supreme Court is literally captured by corporate interests and bribes and right-wing ideology. It's gone. And I think that's a great thing to focus on right now, because I think that's one of the greatest ways to fight the dissonance. No, except that this is dying. Like the jungle is literally going to burn down for something new to be rebuilt. And if you want the new thing to be better, well, get proactively engaged. Yeah, I don't know. That's just my take on why the world sucks and what you can do about it. I don't think we can afford to really be lying to ourselves anymore. And the more you lie to yourself, The more you lie to yourself, the more difficult it's going to be to get through the day. So, yeah, I think my messaging is now going to shift after watching that Jubilee interview to be like, yeah, the Constitution's done. The second, there's going to be lawlessness, not anarchy, lawlessness coming from state thugs, and we need to find ways to prepare for it and get ready for it. Yeah, I think that's the end of my rant, y'all. I think we can get into some questions now, because there's a lot of questions. I think producer Jim has starred like 27 things. Starred. Okay, so we're gonna shift on to random stuff now. Your guys' questions, and we are happy to be the only live stream that really does this regularly. Okay, someone says Putin's a monster. Okay, so it's great power politics, man. Everyone's going to have their opinion. You know who is a monster? Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump. Yeah, a lot of people. I don't know what that one really accomplishes. I'm not a fan of the guy, but okay, cool. Trump sounds like a used car salesman. I mean, he's better. He's kind of better than at least he knows his mark, right? I don't think he'd be able to sell me a used car because I just have a virulent instinctive hatred of him. But I think he's better than a used car salesman because he didn't sell a car. He sold a dream, a vision, a reactionary vision, a revisionary vision of an America that never existed. And people thought that they were going to get back what they had, what their parents had in the 50s and 60s. And of course, he didn't tell them that we had an insanely high corporate tax rate, capital gains tax on the uber rich. So he's selling a vision that never really happened, that never existed. Make America great again is fundamentally like fascist propaganda stuff. Like the Nazis, they had what was it the Nazis or was it Mussolini who had blood and soil? We need to like reinvigorate and get back to our like ancient antediluvian glory days. Yeah. And also he's legitimately a con man. His shit coins, Dogecoin or Trump coin, Melania coin. Yeah. Someone said Netanyahu's a monster. That was a great con. He's made a ton of money for himself and his buddies like at Goldman Sachs. And that's the real point of it. We are at straight fascism right now. The CEOs of IG Farben were put into governmental positions and military positions. We have just commissioned, the CEOs or CFO or COOs from like Palantir and Anduril and Thales as lieutenant colonels in the U.S. Army. So fascism. But yeah, selling a dream, and the dream that what we really understand for their dream to be is a white America, which means a safe America, which I guess means a prosperous America, but it won't be prosperous. I mean, unless it's for like one group of people, and there really won't be any sort of middle class. So yeah, I guess he was a great used car salesman. I mean, he's probably done the best used car sales of all time, or at least in my living memory. What if other countries stop using US dollars? Ooh, that's a complicated one, but basically, it would break the power of the dollar to control and sanction other countries. So we sanction countries with the US dollar, as the US dollar is the global reserve currency, in order to punish behavior or influence behavior that we want to see. And what we always want to see is regional and global hegemonic domination. So, in short, if other countries stop using the US dollar and trade in local regional currencies, it will further handicap our ability to apply hard pressure, either through military or economic means, which means we will go further towards a multipolar where there are different centers of power across the world instead of a unipolar power where there's only one center, one really core center of power, and that's the United States. Of course, we're a dying empire doomed to death, but we are still the empire. Okay, what else we got? West lost all legitimacy in the last decade or two. Too many Hillarys laughing madly. I think, are you referring to her behind the scenes interview with like CNN, was it, when she heard about Gaddafi dying and she said it probably had something to do with me and she laughed? Because that whole regime change war destroyed an entire society, reintroduced open air slave markets back to like the modern world, and, empowered ISIS. Yeah, and then we had the whole global war on terror. And, of course, this Gaza genocide, I think for many people, it's like the final nail in the coffin for, U.S. legitimacy across the globe. Okay, don't want to get too much into theory, but class war has to be global. I don't know how much I can talk about here on Mint Press, but yep. If you want more radical takes, you can check out my own personal platform at Colonial Outcasts. All right, the Epstein thing is a stick to attack Trump with. Any stick will do for the Democrats. I've been talking about the Epstein thing for a while. I've been talking about the Epstein thing for a while, right? But we have to remember that the Democratic Party dismissed the Epstein thing as like a conspiracy. We don't deal with conspiracy. That's a right-wing QAnon thing. And now that they can attack Trump with it, now they're only speaking out against like child sex trafficking and potential involvement of a foreign intelligence agency influencing and blackmailing our politicians and businessmen and political lobbyists and elite. So it's super hypocritical. It kind of reminds me of when Trump bombed Iran, but their response wasn't it wasn't to condemn like the act of war necessarily. It was that he should have gone through the Senate and consulted Congress first. And again, I always like the comparison to Star Wars because I'm a nerd. It's like, the Democrats are the politicians in the Senate, the Galactic Senate, who would be like, listen, Emperor Palpatine, you can totally build a genocidal death machine called the Death Star. Just make sure you go through the Senate first. So, yeah. So I got some questions about regional stuff now. I think they're going to go for Lebanon next. Yes, they're already going for, and they've never stopped going for Lebanon. They've been striking Lebanon this entire time. They're trying to politically isolate Hezbollah so it can be disarmed. Once Hezbollah is disarmed, they hope for a complete governmental and military normalization with Israel. They want to secure the region. So, yeah. And if they can't get rid of Hezbollah through political means and they can't stop the weapon shipments, by the way, they're not able to because there's so much chaos in Syria right now that there's actually things getting over the border, according to people I've been talking to. And they've also created other trade routes and ways to get material and intelligence in there. But if they can't do it politically or diplomatically, they can't do it militarily. So they might try to start a civil war with far-right Maronite Christians and other factions who hate Hezbollah against Hezbollah. So, hang on, I got a message here. And then, of course, we don't have enough time to get into Syria, but what Israel is doing in Syria, starting this war with a government that the U.S. is trying to bring into line, the Jilani government, by offering sanctions relief and financial incentives and political incentives as well, is messing with U.S. foreign policy. And I want to talk about this Thursday because the U.S. diplomatic corps is not happy with Israel at all. I definitely want to focus on like what kind of consequences that can have, because they're going against the U.S. imperial plan right now. And while that might be fine in Israel proper, to be like, yeah, we're going to sabotage the ceasefire, we're going to keep, endorsing settler violence and keep annexing the West Bank. But when you get into broader regional plans, it'll be interesting to watch what the blowback from the United States position will be against Israel. Sanders is a fascist. He's a liberal Zionist. You know, I was speaking to an organizer at the No Kings protest in DC, and she asserted that, yes, the Republican, the GOP, the MAGA world was fascist. And I was like, you can make the argument for the Democratic Party as well. And she said, no, they're neoliberal warlords and imperialists, but they're not fascists. And I was kind of like, okay, well, when capitalism is collapsed, it all goes into fascism, because fascism is imperialism turned in on itself from a very basic reductive perspective, right? And then I was like, in the conversation, it's like, okay, look, if you vote with the fascists, you don't oppose their political appointments, you agree with them to arm a foreign country in proxy wars, both Ukraine and Israel, because the Democrats will always vote to fund Ukraine, even if some Republicans don't want to. If you do not fight fascists at all, but you still occupy government positions and you sheepdog voters away from actual progressive movements to your party, which will not fight the fascists, what's the point of a distinction? Like, I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, what's the point of a distinction between neoliberal imperialist capitalists and fascists when you both work together to achieve the same foreign and domestic policies? I don't know. So, look, I guess I don't want to get bogged down in minutia being like, Sanders is a yeah, okay. I guess I agree with you. This is a great point. This actually goes back to the original point of the episode. I think a ton of people, this is ZendoCat, who are less politically activated, need to witness and reckon with the reality we are dealing with. The only way they're going to do that is if they get less, like, more and more uncomfortable. Like, I know a bunch of white people. I live around them. They're like, oh, ICE is terrible. But they're never going to do any sort of like border abolition work or prison abolition stuff because they're not directly affected. So they're going to have to like lose their jobs. They're going to like literally these people are going to have to get replaced by AI before they do anything and then lose their health care. Like, I think for a lot of people, that's the only way they're going to actually do anything, because it's scary. They've never done this before. They've never been politically involved. They've never taken any political action. And that's why they're scared. And they need to get a lot more desperate. And the only way, they're going to get more desperate is not if they deport more BIPOC people. It's going to be if they lose their jobs to oligarchs and billionaires. And this is what sucks about it. That is going to take time. Because witnessing is not enough for these people. They need to actually be affected. And they're not affected yet. I mean, they're scared, but beyond that, they're not like materially affected. Yeah, you guys, it's almost Bullet the Bunny. It's almost like the richest and most powerful people on the planet know each other. Did you guys know that Kimberly Guilfoyle, let me pull her up. This is fun. Hey, let me share the screen. This is my favorite demonstration right now. Hang on. Sorry, stand by, guys. We're almost at the end. Share screen. Screen. Google. All right. So, adding this to the stage. Kimberly Guilfoyle. Look. She has straight on full send Mar-a-Lago face, which means she is fully in the Trump party. She has gone through the ritualistic scarification process and is now in the party. Because like Mar-a-Lago face, from an anthropological perspective, is a rite of passage. It is a ritual. It is ceremonial in nature. So she's now full Mar-a-Lago face. But she was married to Gavin Newsom before she got Mar-a-Lago face. And look, Gavin Newsom has been consulting MAGA ex-wife Kim Guilfoyle for help with his political rebrand. Boom, boom, boom. And now she has just appointed the Trump ambassador to Greece. Yeah, guys. This is why we can't have nice things like democracy right now. I don't even know what to say. I'm glad you brought that up, Bullet, because I think this is a perfect way to round out this episode. Yeah. Well, guys, again, one thing is, I'll just leave you with this. There's never enough cops. There's never enough soldiers when shit really goes down with the people. So keep doing what you're doing. Keep working those political activism muscles. Show up to different events. I'm going to, on my personal podcast, talk about what mutual aid actually looks like in a way that's sustainable and won't exhaust you, that you can actually do while working a job, having hobbies, having friends and stuff. And then, yeah, we'll just go from there. I mean, everything's collapsing. These ideologies will collapse in on themselves. And in the meantime, we're just going to keep on keeping on and call out the dissonance when you see it. It's the only way you're going to stay sane and not depressed in an anxious wreck in this era of hypernormalization. So anyways, that's from my perspective why the world sucks right now. And it's as the good Captain John Brown once said, there is no night dark enough to hinder the coming day. So yeah, one foot in front of the other, y'all. And we will see you Thursday. Cheers. Yeah, someone said capitalism is the problem. Yep. All right, bye. You guys have a great night. Happy Monday.